Hello everyone, welcome to Drishti IAS. You're watching the NCERT Foundation Series, and today we are going to cover some questions on the topic of federalism. Those of the questions are primarily going to be PYQs and a couple of other MCQs just for concept clarity. So without further ado, let's plunge right in with the previous day question. So the previous day question asked you about the writ of prohibition. So the question asks, a writ of prohibition is an order issued by the Supreme Court or High Courts to, and if you have read your NCERTs well and you've read them thoroughly, you would be able to answer this question. Now, I have explained in sufficient detail in some of the previous videos about various writs. So today we are talking about the writ in question, which is the writ of prohibition. What are the other writs? They are habeas corpus, mandamus, then there is prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto. Now all of them serve a particular function: to have the body of. This is the meaning of habeas corpus. Mandamus means we command. Prohibition is to prevent, as the name itself indicates. Certiorari means to certify or to be certified. Quo warranto means by what authority? Now, these are the different kind of writs. The writ in question, of course, is the writ of prohibition, and so let's see what exactly prohibition means. Now, prohibition, as the name suggests, is basically means to prohibit or to prevent. Who is preventing whom or who is prohibiting whom? Naturally, the higher courts, that is the Supreme Court or the High Court, is prohibiting the lower courts. Now, what are they prohibiting the lower courts about? About these cases where if they can prohibit the lower court to continue a case or to proceed with a case, or to exceed its jurisdiction, meaning that the higher court may prohibit the lower court to continue with a case if the jurisdiction is being exceeded or if it falls outside its judicial authority, outside the lower court's judicial authority, all right? And finally, if the case is or the proceedings are contrary to law, all right? This is the writ of prohibition in a nutshell. Now, with this information, let's try and attempt the question. A government officer prohibiting him from taking a particular action? No. So, we are not here talking about the High Court or the Supreme Court prohibiting a government order. We are talking about them prohibiting a lower court, be the Parliament or Legislative Assembly, to pass a law on prohibition. This has nothing to do with passing of any law. C, the lower court prohibiting the continuation of a proceedings in a case. This is absolutely correct. This is actually accurate. So, we have option C as the correct answer. With reference to Indian federalism, consider the following statements. Now, again, we have done in previous years in previous years books, and some chapters we have again covered the topic of federalism. right? So here on the basis of that, we are going to attempt a question. First, the term federation appears in Article 1 of the Constitution. Now, let's talk about Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution says that India or Bharat or India shall be a union of states. So, according to Article 1, Bharat or India shall be a union of states. So, as you can see, the word federation has nowhere been mentioned. So, has the word federation been mentioned in the article? No. Federation has not been mentioned, and let's say that was a deliberate choice by our constitution makers. Now, when Article 1 says India shall be a union of states, what does it mean? It implies two things. First, it talks about the name of the union, and secondly, it indicates what? It indicates the type of polity. The type of polity. The type of polity over here is clear. The Constitution is not referring to a federation. A federation is akin to the case of the United States. What happened in the case of the USA, United States of America? That various colonies came together and formed a federation, right? And it is known as an indestructible federation of indestructible states, indestructible union, as well as that of indestructible states. Whereas in the case of India, we are an indestructible union but with destructible states. And by destructible means that we have the authority to change the boundary, to alter the name of the state, to admit new states, all right, as well. So here, as is clear, Article 1 does not use the term federation because there was no coming together in the sense in which United States came together. There is simply one state and which is divided into various territories for administrative convenience, all right? That is the whole idea. Now, statement 2 says Parliament requires the consent of the concerned state legislature before altering its boundaries. Now, here again, we are referring to Article 3. What does Article 3 talk about? Article 3 gives the permission. Let's do it on a different slide. So when we talk about Article 3 of the Constitution, basically it says that the Parliament has the authority to do what exactly? So the Parliament has the authority to basically form a new state. The Parliament has the authority to form a new state. What else? The Parliament can increase the area of a state. Now, naturally, if the Parliament can increase the area, therefore, it also must be having the authority to diminish the area of a state. Logical. Right? Then, of course, the Parliament also has the authority to alter the boundaries. If you look at it closely, they are all following from each other. So, this is a very logical flow of what the Parliament is authorized to do. And finally, change the name of states. Now, when it says form a new state, how does a new state come to be in this case? Now, either there is a bigger state and a smaller state can come out of it. So, this is a separate state and this becomes a separate state, or there are two separate territories that may be united to form a single state. All right, this is what is meant here. Does the parliament need to take the consent of the state legislatures? So no. Here are two conditions. First, that any such bill that requires the parliament to make all these changes can be introduced only with the prior permission or prior recommendation of the president. That is certainly a condition. Second, the opinion of the state needs to be taken. So this is also another condition. Of course, the state in question who is going to undergo any of these modifications or alterations are going to be consulted and their opinions will be taken. But are the opinion or is the opinion of the state in question binding? It is not. So this opinion is non-binding. All right, it is not binding on the parliament. So the parliament has quite a lot of authority in this regard. So here we can actually say that this statement is wrong because the parliament does not require the consent. All right, it is of course required to seek the opinion, not the consent. Please notice, we are only talking about opinion. Statement 3 says the Constitution describes India as a union of states to signify that the federation is not the result of an agreement among states. Yes, we have already contrasted this with the case of the United States of America, which is in fact the result of an agreement, albeit a very strong agreement. And of course, even there the states have no right to secede. Similarly, we are using the term union and not federation to signify that this federation or this coming together is not the result of an agreement and that the states do not have the right to secede. Hence, the statement 3 is correct. So 3 only, or option C happens to be our correct answer. I hope this is clear. Next question, consider the following statements. India, despite having a federal structure, has a large number of centralizing features. Now, we talked about in the earlier videos that a polity could either be unitary or it could be federal in nature. What is federal exactly? Being unitary and federal. So by federal, it is simply meant an institutional mechanism that accommodates different types of polity at different levels. So let's say 2 types of polity at different levels, at the level of the union and at the level of states. Whereas in the case of a unitary form of government or a unitary polity, we know that there is only one central unit which governs throughout the territory, which is not the case in a federal setup. All right. So we also know that despite being a federal nation, and we know why India chose to be a federal structure, that was also a very deliberate choice on the part of our constitution makers. Why? Because we know that India, the nation, spans almost the size of a continent. So India is continental in nature, in size, in terms of its diversity, in terms of the variety, the differences that we have. So in order to accommodate different flavors and different cultures and different interests of all the regions, the constitution makers found it fit to have a federal structure. They were sure that a federal structure would do justice to the diversity of the nation. However, we are talking about a time where India had recently gained independence and India had a very heartbreaking partition. It was a painful moment. And we had recently come out of the colonial rule. So we also did not want the power to be divided between so many units without a centralizing command to take care of the socio-economic issues of the country. That also had to be taken care of. Therefore, the constitution makers decided that we would of course have a federal structure but with a centralizing tendency or with a unitary bias. All right. So that is statement 1 and we know that this is accurate. The next statement says the constitution provides for a number of unitary features like single citizenship, integrated judiciary and all India services. Now this again is absolutely correct. Of course we have the single citizenship in place, unlike in the US where somebody has to be a citizen of the state as well as a federal citizen. So a person in US has to have 2 citizenships, one of the state to which that person belongs and the other a federal citizenship of the US. Now also integrated judiciary is a unitary feature because we have a pyramidal structure of judiciary. How? We have the Supreme Court at the apex followed by various high courts and then multiple subordinate courts, right? And this here at the apex, the Supreme Court is the topmost and the most powerful judicial structure of our nation. Hence, the judiciary is integrated, meaning the rulings of the Supreme Court are binding on all citizens and on all states. All right. So again, this is a unitary feature. Same with all India services. Why is it unitary? Because these services perform or function uniformly throughout the territory of the country. There is uniformity. So this again is an example of unitary features or the unitary bias that you can see in the federal structure of India. So this again statement 2 is absolutely correct. Now your option says both statement 1 and statement 2 are correct and statement 2 is the correct explanation for statement 1. So I would go with option A because indeed both the statements are correct and option B explains as to why we have made that assertion in the first place. Why did we say that India, despite having a federal structure, has a large number of centralizing tendencies or centralizing features? Why did we say that? Because of these features. Hence, the second statement is in fact explaining the first and option A is the correct answer. This incidentally was a PYQ in 2023. And imagine if you had read your NCERTs well, then you would have marked that question correct. Now, please take a look at this amazing NCERT online course that Drishti IAS has brought to you for your UPSC foundation. And the best part is that there is an amazing price drop. So the course is available to you for a very good, very reasonable price, which is 5,555 rupees in place of rupees 10,000 that the course was available for earlier. And in case you purchase this course and visit our offline centers to get admitted or enrolled in our IAS Foundation course at any branch, then you will receive a full fee waiver of the NCERT course fee. I think this is a very good offer and I think you should definitely go check out the NCERT online course. If you want more information, kindly check the link in the description box and dial 87501 for further information. Now another PYQ. Consider the following statements. An amendment to the Constitution of India can be initiated by an introduction of a bill in the Lok Sabha only. Now quickly tell me which article number deals with constitutional amendments. Please send me this answer in the comment section. Now look at the statement. An amendment to the Constitution of India can be initiated by an introduction of a bill in the Lok Sabha only. Now had the statement stopped here at Lok Sabha itself, the answer would have been correct. The statement would have been correct. But it is followed by the term only. Now we know that, and when we talked about the Parliament's constituent powers, we know that we said that any bill which talks about amending the Constitution can be introduced in either house of the Parliament. If you remember, we did talk about this. Now, under which article you have to tell me, all right? But you have to remember that it cannot be introduced in the state legislatures. It cannot be introduced in the state legislatures. You can only introduce it in the Parliament. Now, there is indeed one type of bill that can be introduced in the Lok Sabha only. Let me know in the comment section what is that bill which can be introduced only in the Lok Sabha, under which article as well. All right. Now, statement 2 says, if such an amendment seeks to make changes in the federal character of the Constitution, the amendment also requires to be ratified by the legislatures of all states of India. Notice the word all states. Now, let's discuss first how a constitutional amendment bill is passed. It is, and we have discussed this earlier, but let's just quickly refresh our memories. It can be introduced in either house of the Parliament, making the first statement correct. It cannot be introduced in the state legislatures. Now, any such bill has to be passed by both houses of the Parliament by a special majority. What is meant by a special majority? Special majority means, and I will reiterate it so that it is ingrained in our subconscious. It means a majority of the total membership of the House plus 2/3 of the members present and voting. All right. So it means majority of the total membership of the House plus, out of the people who are present, out of the MPs who are present, 2/3 of them should also vote in the favor of the bill. All right. This is known as special majority, and the bill has to be passed, such an amendment bill has to be passed in both the houses by a special majority. Now, if an amendment is seeking to make changes in the federal character, what do you mean by making changes to the federal character, or what are those bills or what are those provisions that mean or that refer to making changes in the federal character? Let's count them one by one. It could be about the election of the president. We have done that in a lot of detail even earlier. Election of the president does involve state legislatures. Let me remind you. What else? Talks about the Supreme Court and High Court. The powers of the Supreme Court and the High Court. All right. Or the executive powers of the union and the states. All right. What else? Also, GST, matters related to GST Council, because it also involves the union and the states. And then the article which deals with the Constitution amendment itself is involved here. I'm not writing it here because I've asked you to answer me in the comment section. All right. So these are among the things that deal with making changes to the federal character of the Constitution. Now the next part says the amendment requires to be ratified by the state legislatures of all the states of India. This is inaccurate. It needs to be ratified by or consented to by 50% of the states. So this statement again is inaccurate. Another hint, and this is just a hint, this might not be applicable every single time, but we can still keep this in mind while we are attempting questions. And I've told you in the past as well, look out for words like only or all. Words which are very emphatic in nature, which lay particular emphasis, all right, or which are exclusive, only this, only that, or which are universal, which are absolute, all, none, all right. Those statements containing those words are likely to be wrong. They're likely to be incorrect. Now, this is a rule of thumb. It will not apply everywhere, but it is likely that you do still look out for words like these. And therefore, if we are asking about correct statements, we know that neither 1 nor 2. Which of the following best illustrates the principle of asymmetrical federalism is in India? Now, federalism, as we have discussed over the course of several lectures in this series, is basically referring to the vertical division of powers. And of course, the powers are divided between, in case of India, between the center and the states. Now, this particular thing, the division of powers between the main unit and the subordinate units, is simply federalism. What makes it asymmetrical is that even within these subordinate units, all right, even within these subordinate units, there is a difference in some kind of, let's say, power or some provisions, in the sense that some of these smaller units, which in India's case could be states or union territories, have certain unique features to them. All right. For example, they may have certain special provisions made out for them, as in the case of, let's say, J&K until very recently, and even now, or let's say in the case of Nagaland. Name the article. Please tell me in the comments which article deals with the special provisions for Nagaland. All right. Or then it could, we could also say that they could have features like, let's say, autonomous councils, right? Or they could have certain other unique constitutional safeguards or provisions. All right. As in the case of, let's say, 6th schedule, states in the 6th schedule. Now, what could be the provisions? So, here these states have what working for them? They have autonomous district councils. That is one feature that they can have, or they do have in fact. Then they also have the authority to, let's say, levy taxes. All right. They have the authority to frame their own laws on what subjects exactly? On the subjects of culture, village, forests. All right. All of these topics they can, or all of these, on these subjects they can frame their own laws. So these are special provisions for the 6th schedule. So this is what these provisions are, what exactly are representative of asymmetrical federalism. Let's look at the option A, representation of smaller states in Rajya Sabha. So there is indeed an asymmetry here, but not in terms of federalism, but rather in terms of population. We have discussed this. C says interstate council under article 263. Now this interstate article is not an example of asymmetric federalism, but rather an example of cooperative federalism. Then option D says All India services. Again, we cannot call it asymmetrical in any way because we've already discussed a few moments ago that these services function with uniformity throughout the country. So they are not asymmetrical, they're not representative of asymmetrical in any sense, federalism in any sense, and therefore option B is our correct answer. Now, before we move forward, we have already seen how reading your NCERT thoroughly and getting your concepts clarified is going to help you with your UPSC preparation. So please do check this course out. It has 150 plus classes and a validity of 2 years, and now it is available at a very reasonable price of rupees 5,555 rupees. Please enroll now. For more information, please check the link in the description and call 87501 87501. And here again, I have the practice question for you, which again is a PYQ. Notice how, as we are progressing with the classes of the NCERT, we are getting more and more PYQs from them, sometimes being lifted directly. So please do not ignore the importance of the NCERTs. Kindly take a look at these questions. Send me your answers in the comment section. If you found this video useful, kindly like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.